Good morning. Welcome to Taxes Made Easy. We've got an interesting show today. We're going to be focusing on tax avoidance and what is it? So when people hear avoidance, they often think that it's something illegal. That's tax evasion and tax fraud. So how can you get and be involved in tax avoidance without facing criminal prosecution? That's what we're going to be talking about today, and there are plenty of legal ways to reduce your taxes. And again, it's even within the IRS has been forced to acknowledge that taxpayers have a right to do so. The Supreme Court has held that, and to try to pay as little in taxes as possible legally, upfront, not trying to hide assets, but using the rules and the current tax code to your benefit. And this is how people stay wealthy and accumulate wealth. So we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. And we're going to just dive into the news. There's a lot of news to cover on a Friday morning, but we're going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. So the first article is from townhall.com. You can't make this stuff up. So with this huge global issue that's been going on, thousands upon thousands of airlines canceled. Crowdstrike, the company at the heart of this cybersecurity company, that's a global company, is offering $10 Uber Eats gift cards to say, I'm sorry. So it crashed millions of computers globally with the glitch. It takes us right to the. So here's the letter, and people are laughing at it. To express our gratitude, your next cup of coffee or late night snack is on us. Sorry it cost you billions of dollars. That's in U.S. Fortune 500 companies face more than $5 billion in financial losses. Global hit as high as $15 billion. And this doesn't include all the small companies that have had a much tougher time with this because they don't have IT at their beck and call like the larger companies do to fix these issues as soon as possible. So $10 gift card for the largest IT outage in history. So sometimes if you're with the biggest guys, that might not be the best. So people that weren't using Crowdstrike, didn't have any problems or avoided most of the problems. So one of the big issues here is that there was a lack of redundancy. So they didn't have older systems as a backup. And it says, on Friday, we failed you. For that, I'm deeply sorry. Here's $10. So, kind of funny. It's Friday. We're going to try to have a little fun on a Friday. Next article is about Chipotle and a scandal addressing or involving the size of their burrito bowl portions. So, there's been some complaints about this, shrinkflation. People are complaining about it. Is it a real thing? Probably. Absolutely. Restaurants and businesses they're struggling and they're trying every single way to get afloat. But this became an issue. Someone actually went and did a study, and they went to a bunch of different restaurants. And so in response, the CPO Brian Nicole is coming out and recognizing the frustration. He's like, there was never a directive to provide less to our customers. This never came from up top. And generous portions has always been a core brand equity to their restaurants. So he goes, we're re-emphasizing training and coaching to make sure that they're consistent. And their study, they found, they ordered and weighed 75 like for like or similar burrito bowls across 8 locations in New York City. So someone really likes Chipotle. The smallest bowl weighed in at 13.8 ounces and the largest at 26.8. So that is a big difference, double the size depending on where you're going. But that's typical. All franchises have their own little flavor. And part of it is getting to know which ones are more generous. So again, when you're out there shopping, just be aware if you have a store that's not providing, you can complain and maybe get something addressed like this. You can do a study. That's a lot of burrito bowls though. And weigh this out. But again, most of the time, just be aware what's going on. So I thought that was kind of funny. Not as funny, but Boeing was criminally charged for having and this is from the Epic Times, $940 million as a penalty for their negligence and this is a proposed plea agreement from 2 fatal crashes in 2018 and 2019. So,
with KPMG's help, we are offering better service
in 21,
who need us most.
they agreed to pay $243.6 million fine and comply with new safety obligations. And they haven't kept up with that. So you have the door plug that blew out in January. They've had tires falling off. They've had all kinds of additional problems. So that's going to jump to an additional $487.2 million as a penalty. So I guess it's really sad to see a great company like this, a great American company with a huge history. I'm a military guy. I love military history, but to see them suffering this bad. So again, it's some pretty big hits. When you look at Boeing and the billions of dollars, maybe it's not that big. But hopefully they learned their lesson. Another another story, not the best story. 134-year-old American furniture store closing all 533 stores. So this is Cons. So I've never shopped at Cons, but it's a furniture store. It's all across the country, but really, people holding on to money, luxury goods, and new furniture is something that people just aren't spending money on. And so it's not the only furniture store is suffering due to the bankruptcy, but their liquidity has become such a problem that they're closing this very quickly. It was founded in 1890, been around forever. So the biggest issues: consumer behavior, interest rate pressures, inflation, integration delays, and increased costs with the firm's merger during 23-24. So it's been a huge issue for them, and right now their liabilities are between the range of $1 billion to $10 billion, which is pretty extreme. So they just accumulated way too much debt. There's closures in 13 states. There's one here in Tucson, at least one. But again, this is not a good thing. This is not good news overall for the economy. And it's going to put about 4,000 people out of work. So again, bankruptcies are up right now. And continuing with the fun news, I'll get more fun, I promise. This is from Yahoo Finance. Credit card delinquency rates hits the worst level since 2012 in a new federal study. So when things are tight and interest rates go up, people that rely on credit cards are suffering the most. So this is why I've been trying to hammer on the topic of paying down credit cards, paying down debt, get out of debt now, especially with the economy not doing so hot. It's the time to retrench, and ideally in good times we should be retrenching and really paying down things and paying down debt and saving for our future. But especially right now, I'll tighten the belt, try to avoid payments, try to avoid unnecessary debt. So it climbed 2.5%, and that's more than double the lows seen the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's the highest level since 2012 when they first started tracking these numbers. So on all stages of credit card delinquency, 30, 60, and more than 90 days past due rose during the first 3 of the month, years of the month, and it's continued. So it's going to hurt a lot of people. Expect a lot of personal bankruptcies. And if you are in this situation, call, get help. I was speaking to someone yesterday. I did a radio show yesterday. And, one of the comments was, people need help. People absolutely need help with IRS tax debt, with credit card debt. They need help getting on their feet, especially now. And so a lot of people are holding back because they don't think they have the money to pay for assistance. We can help people save money, especially if the government's taking money from you, and really help give you peace of mind in these tough times. So again, the amount of stress that people deal with when carrying debt is overwhelming, and that's one of the reasons I love what I do, is helping people find that peace of mind. It's not just a mantra for us; it's what we really try to do. So interesting couple articles here, depending on your opinion and how you look at things. So there's one article from townhall.com. So Biden drops out of 2024 race, and then all of a sudden, Russia is suddenly open to peace talks. So this is from townhall.com, and it comes from a right-leaning perspective. But I'm calling it out a little bit because, again, they love to call out liberal news articles when they're wrong or emphasize one side of things. And so they really are kind of pounding this in, that the foreign ministry, Ukrainian foreign ministry, told Chinese Communist Party diplomats that they're willing to negotiate with Russia right now. And it's no accident, probably not a coincidence that Joe Biden just stepped out of the race. So with Joe Biden stepping out of the race, the odds that Trump will win the next presidential election, among prognosticators and what foreign countries are looking at, has gone up quite a bit. So with that in mind, apparently Russia had a change of heart, as well as Zelensky, or the Ukrainian government, and the Ukrainians have been holding out for Russia to leave all of Ukraine. Is this a win if Russia still retains territory in Ukraine? It's questionable. I mean, Russia is getting something, but Ukraine is not a NATO ally. It is concerning to see Russia just go and attack a country. And the interesting thing is, this would have never happened if Ukraine still had nuclear weapons, but President Clinton guaranteed Ukraine that they had nothing to worry about if they disarmed and got rid of all their nuclear weapons. So if they still had nuclear weapons, Russia would not be attacking them. But they disarmed, and we did not protect them, as Clinton promised. And so it's very, very interesting here to see. Usually Ukraine is really caught in the middle of the West, the United States, and waning support for Ukraine. And again, they have a very noble cause, but at the same time, how long do we go? How long do we continue the war, and how many people are suffering, dying because of this? One of the bigger concerns is Ukraine is running out of soldiers, and I am over time. We're going to have to come back to this after this break. Welcome back, everybody. And just following up with the next article here, um, really kind of going over the differences here between this article and the original article. This is actually from the Global Times, and interesting enough, this is coming from China, so it has a very Chinese take on things. Same facts, different perspective. So they're highlighting China's significant role in promoting peace. So here the Chinese government, which is anything but peaceful and is causing all kinds of world angst and issues in Taiwan, throughout the South China Sea, trying to dominate the Philippines, Vietnam, other countries, and really bold people across the country, is trying to position themselves as a promoter of peace in negotiating a peace that Russia will accept, and trying to bring Ukraine along, especially now that Ukraine, you might rightly believe that Trump is going to force a peace or withdraw support. So Trump has said we're going to end ruinous wars, we're going to end just sending money overseas, especially in wars that just drag on and on. So again, it's in its third year of conflict. It's a quagmire right now, and so there's a risk of escalation spilling over. So really, China here is claiming, and it's China really is trying to supplant the U.S. role as a mediator, and they're definitely aligned with Russia and the worst governments in the world, but they're trying to really change the current global power structure in their favor at the expense of the United States. So part of it, I think part of the issue is that we haven't been in there mediating for peace. We've been supporting Zelensky without question, and maybe that was the right thing to do initially. 3 years later, is it still the right thing to do? A whole nother question. So no easy answer here. But it's very interesting that China, sorry I didn't share this tab, China did not really enable Russia to continue the war through buying all their oil and helping Russia avoid sanctions, and kept this war going, but now they're promoting peace and trying to help negotiate peace between Russia and Ukraine. So kind of ironic. But again, it just highlights China's growing role in diplomacy, and they are not peacemakers in general. So it's very interesting to see China try to take on this role. So the next article, this is something we've talked about in the G20, Brazil, foreign countries. I'm not sure if he's really missing a pinky finger there or just anyway. Again, finance ministers in Rio de Janeiro from all over the world. This is a top priority for Brazil. They want a global tax on the super rich. How are the super rich identified? Individuals having 1 billion in total assets. So they want this global tax to then be spread out amongst the global. Where do most of the billionaires live? The United States. There are plenty of billionaires that do live outside, but again, there's a few countries where they're concentrated. The Middle East, but most of the world's richest people live in the United States and are citizens of the United States. So this is something that would hit the United States particularly hard, and it's not 2% of their income. It's 2% of their total wealth or assets. So this would force billionaires to liquidate, sell off, and pull money out of their the economies that they're in, mainly in the United States, to pay this 2% wealth. So they don't hold on to wealth. They do have savings. They do have assets that can be liquidated. But whenever you pull things out of investments that usually hurts the countries that in the economies where it is, where they're pulling their investments out. So you have a lot of the world: France, Spain, South Africa, A lot of countries supporting this because they're not the ones that are hurt the most. It's very interesting. Yellen has gone back and forth on this. The Biden administration has really waffled on this. Do they support it? Do they not? They like this idea of globalization. They like being a global community, but their support for this has been lukewarm, and they haven't taken the strongest stance against this. So she gives it kind of a non-answer. Tax policy is very difficult to coordinate globally. We don't see a need or really think it's desirable to negotiate a global agreement on that. So at this time, they don't see a need for that, but they're strongly supportive of progressive taxation. And this would be a huge example of take from the rich, give to the poor. And the reason they're trying to do this is they want to diminish the attractiveness of tax havens. If it's a global tax, then there's not as much incentive for billionaires to flee to lower tax countries. So, and they have a study saying that they barely pay anything of their total wealth because it's based on their yearly income. It's not confiscatory where they sit there and take wealth just because they have it. That's what socialist and communist countries do, for the most part. So anyway, moving on. This is something that hits more to home. We have probably 3 Safeways within 10 miles of us that would be closed down because Albertsons and Safeway merged. And so there's a few Albertsons scattered around Tucson and throughout Arizona, but I see more Safeways than anything else. And so if Kroger, which is locally Fry's, and Albertsons merged, you would have a huge consolidation of stores. So it impacts a lot of people locally. This is a huge merger, the largest merger. So it'd be the largest merger of supermarket chains in U.S. history. Where's our government making sure that we don't get super monopolies, super big companies that restrict trade? So here the federal district court and the federal government is suing. Well, you have the Colorado district judge. So this is in state court in Colorado suing to stop this, as well as the federal government is suing to stop this as well. So there is a lot of fighting going on here. Just allowing for massive mergers, growth without any consideration of consumers, I don't think is a positive thing. I think it's a very negative thing. So they've got a couple lawsuits trying to permanently block the merger on grounds that would harm competition by creating a monopoly of food that would drive up prices. Now, part of it is these companies are trying to survive in a very difficult economy. Food prices have gone up across the country quite a bit. Over the last 3 years. So it's something that's affecting a lot of people. It affects the poorest the most. People are looking at alternatives. There are food banks. There's other cheaper grocery stores. Walmart has expanded grocery store prices. I'm not sure they're always cheaper though. So again, it's a lot of concerns going back and forth as to really what is best for the consumers. Personally, I think it would be a good thing to block this merger. And if they do that, they would acquire all of Safeway stores. They wouldn't be required to sell a bunch off to a competitor from the east, but they would employ 710,000 associates and operate nearly 5,000 stores across all 48 states. So Kroger is trying to go and be a national market, so they'll pretty much be in every market in the United States. But there's a lot of overlap, especially in the West, between Kroger and Albertsons. Pardon me. So which raises cause for concern. So interesting enough, this kind of dovetails into our main topic today. What a real GOP worker would look like. And this is from creators.com. It's a different site. I thought this was an interesting read. And the Veronica de Rugi is the author, and I've actually read some of her stuff before. She's George Gibbs Chair of Political Economy and a senior research fellow at George Mason University. And I think she puts out some interesting things. So this is coming from a conservative perspective, but calling out the Republicans just as well as the Democrats. So calling out the Republicans for, especially with J.D. Vance, for sounding like, and I'm going to make this bigger, it's probably hard to read. I know my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. Come from elite Ivy League schools, and she's questioning, is the Republican Party actually getting it when it comes to the working class? Or is it just lip service like usual? So the Republicans are trying to get away with the moniker of being just for big business. And again, she really calls out the Republicans, which I think is valid, for having confused being free market for free markets with propping up and protecting big banks and other companies. Mitt Romney, huge example of this. Sorry, I supported him at the time. In retrospect, I was very disappointed with him as a senator. He argued and fought tooth and nail to prop up and support all the banks in the 2008 crash. The same banks that have led to more issues because they weren't held accountable for their poor decisions. The whole too big to fail, I think, is a horrible line. And so, again, there's many ways that they do this. Democrats do the same, but this is the biggest complaint I hear from conservatives, from many people out there. You have a uniparty where Republican, Democrat, they get in the office and they act the same. They both spend, they both prop up big businesses, and who ends up getting hurt in the end? The average American. And so, in some ways, I guess, probably a little bit more of a populist, in my opinion, but she argues the first essential step to stop supporting large corporations and large businesses at the expense of small businesses and individuals. Get rid of subsidies, bailouts, tax breaks, and other government-granted privileges to big corporations. It's usually not productive, and this is part of the huge bias toward big business at the expense of small business and Main Street America. And this would allow the markets to do their job, and again, if the idea is you get the government out, and the economy will work towards everybody's gain. She doubts that Trump and Vance will actually do this. There have been some in the Republican Party. Ted Cruz, I know he's been torn apart by the leftist media, but he really has pitched. He went to Ohio and won the Iowa. He went to Iowa in 2016 and won the Iowa caucus by telling corn farmers he was going to get rid of their subsidies. And you would think, why didn't he lose? How in the world did he win that caucus? He won because he was going to get rid of all the other red tape that would actually help them more, help them operate, help the free market operate, where they could go out and actually make more money, be more productive, but at the same time get the government out of the picture. It's not enough people talking like that. So more and more you have pro-worker policies that really actually do hurt people. So whenever they say tax, we're going to tax the rich, we're going to tax corporations, it's paid by real people, not corporations. They just pass the taxes on. So they pass the corporate income tax on to workers in the form of lower wages, higher prices, and shareholders get hurt in the form of lower dividends. So whenever you tax corporations, you really are taxing and hurting the workers, consumers, and shareholders, all real people. So it's compares it to a game of hot potato, except the potato is on fire. They had a saying in the Navy that crap rolls downhill, and whenever a problem is thrown in the lap of large corporations, large businesses, of course they figure out a way, and they just roll it downhill because they're responsible. If they don't, they just try to take the bullet and eat the bullet. They're going to have shareholders upset. It's going to hurt the bottom line. And it can cause businesses to shut down. Again, large bankruptcies are up now more than ever. So again, we're still seeing large bankruptcies happening across the United States, and that's not good for the economy. So if they don't adjust, their shareholders could revolt, they could lose their positions and or face bankruptcy. So again, you have wages stagnating faster. I like this line. Imagine workers surprised when they find wages stagnating faster than a politician's principles during election season. I love the sarcasm. At least we stuck it to corporations. The politicians we say as workers tighten their belts another notch. Same thing for industrial policy. Normally they prop up a few markets rather than helping the economy at large. That's usually done for military, national security, and a desire to bring manufacturing jobs. But what we need is less subsidies and more competition. And encouraging American growth in manufacturing. So making it cheaper, easier to do business, easier to work and get permits and get set up. And that's one of the biggest things. It's so hard to do business here in America. So she points out the industrial base is doing well. Capacity is an all-time high. And when the government does help out well-connected corporations through tariffs, tax credits, etc., they say it's a boondoggle for the politically powerful, and it hurts everybody else. Both parties are very, very guilty of this. Congress, it's absolutely ridiculous how they benefit and do insider trading when they know they're going to benefit particular corporations. If they had to just play the market like everybody else, it would be very, very different for them, and they wouldn't come out millionaires off of 100,000 salaries. So she mentions Joe Biden's industrial policy as trying to help semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and advanced technologies. It's cost us between 1.2 and 2 trillion. And domestic subsidies, that's huge. Most of them are reaping tax dollars for projects they would have likely undertaken anyway. So half of the projects for the Inflation Reduction Act were already announced before it was passed, and the private green market was already booming before the subsidies. So the subsidies allow things to continue to help it, but at what cost? Again, jacking up the federal deficit, adding more, creating more problems down the road. And the idea is that politicians always want to be seen doing something. I'm supporting this. I'm for this. One of the politicians, famous Calvin Coolidge, was a president during the 1929 Wall Street market crash, and he was roundly criticized as a do-nothing president, but he believed in the power of markets, that if you left the markets alone, it would recover on its own. We'd have a much quicker recovery. Franklin FDR was elected as a result of that, and he said, I'm going to do all these things for the American people. I'm going to go and show that the government cares. Many economists believe that he took the crash and the Depression and turned it into the Great Depression by coming in and doing for the American people. So again, I'm out of time, but we're going to continue this when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. Just going to wrap up this article. Again, talking about how subsidies usually are counterproductive or just throwing money to the wind. Large corporations love it, but again, it leads to a lot of waste. And the stories of companies getting large subsidies, huge, massive subsidies, Solyndra being one from the Obama administration that comes to mind. But it happens for both parties where we throw massive subsidies at a company and it becomes corrupt. They just blow the money because we just essentially just gave it to them. There are too numerous to go through all of them. I mean, again, it's rife throughout history. And part of the corruption that I hope, and this author, Ms. Rui, hopes to end as well. So she ends up tearing into tariffs, and that's what a big piece of President Trump's package. Light tariffs, 10% across the board. I'm not sure if that's, it might not hurt us too much. Hitting China hard? Yes. In the end, who takes it on the nose as far as tariffs? Americans. So many other countries will retaliate with their own tariffs on American products. So long term, not sure if it's a great way, but again, when we're getting hit, when we're getting being treated unfairly, we do need a president that will stand up and call this out. And President Biden also stated that he would respond with tariffs against China as well. I don't know if it's such a great idea, why hasn't he already done it? So again, it could be very counterproductive. I want to move on clearly to the last article for the day, talking about tax avoidance. This is where I want to spend the rest of our time. Sorry, the last article, I think it's important that we look at both sides with a critical eye. That we look at the Democrats and the Republicans with a critical eye. Just because someone's selling us something, even though it appeals to our biases and our ideals, that we should sit back and learn more about some of these issues and say, okay, is this a good idea or not? How is this going to help or hurt us as a country and individuals in the long run? So this is from Yahoo Finance, talking about tax avoidance. And just yesterday I was talking about Hunter Biden going to court, the judge smacking around his attorneys and saying, look, I'm going to hit you guys personally if you guys continue to lie, continue to mislead or try to mislead the court based on clear and obvious history here. So it's pretty bad. But what is tax avoidance, though? What are some examples of this? So he talks about two legal tactics for people that the rich use, and he talks about purchasing assets, building up your portfolio, and when you buy stocks, you never sell them. And he says you borrow against them, which means you never sell them. If you never sell them, you never pay the taxes on them because capital gains aren't realized. Will you eventually sell? Yes, sometimes. It can be a great strategy for retirement. But he's saying most of the rich borrow against them and then just pay them off and pay usually less in interest when the economy is good and interest rates are low than stocks. Stocks are a great way to hedge against inflation as long as you're invested well. And the second strategy he looks at is state arbitrage, which is moving to a more favorable state. A lot of people are moving with their feet today. California and New York, and then people fleeing them like crazy. And people are mainly going to Texas and Florida. Arizona is another big destination. Nevada is big, so places with no state income tax. Beware, though, because look at where you are. Some places like Austin, Texas, very liberal city, their property taxes are through the roof. So you shouldn't just be looking at state income tax. You should be looking at property taxes, sales taxes, at the whole basket of taxes, because there are some states that have really high property taxes that can hurt you just as much or more. So one of the persons he's kind of calling off, and it's kind of funny, calling out Jeff Bezos. He decided to move from Seattle, Washington to Miami, Florida. and it's just spend more time with dad, with his parents that just moved. He says, "Isn't that sweet, Stephen? Isn't that nice?" However, the timing of this is a little suspect. He got 160 billion in wealth. He would pay another 8 to 10% in state taxes in Washington to pay for the public school system and everything else. And then 21, they impose another 7% tax on any gain in excess of 250,000. So if he's planning on selling stocks, doing anything like that, Washington is not the place to do it. And after this is when Bezos decided to move to Florida, where he could save $600 million in taxes. That is not chump change. And he can do it legally. So California is trying to pass a law, and I don't think it would be upheld by the courts, to go after people that move and try to sell assets. California is notorious for trying to tax people out of the state, but a lot of that is suspect, and especially on a larger case, if they try to do that to billionaires moving out of the state, they would sue them in federal court, and California very well could lose that. But their legislature is still trying anyway. So I want to focus on this idea of tax avoidance. Good example of this is I had someone, true story, and I've shared this story before. He reached out to me a few years ago, and he had not filed taxes going all the way back to 1996. And I believe this was around 21. So it was around 23 years of tax returns he hadn't filed. And he figured he would get straight with the IRS and file all of those tax returns. And he did so and then called me. So yes, 2020, 21, somewhere around there that he called me. He had already mailed them off. That was my first question. It's like, did you mail these off? He's like, no, I didn't. Or no, he's like, yes, I did. I just mailed them off. So there's no way, once they're put in the mail and they're in the post, your best hope is that the IRS just loses the tax returns, which they are good at losing stuff. But so he was going to pay for all those 23 years, but the time to collect on that is 10 years from when the IRS gets and receives the tax return. So when they receive and process the tax return. So if it was done in 21, the IRS still has until 2031 to collect on taxes going back to 1996. So it's a legal principle that we don't want people to still be paying taxes from 30, 40 years ago. We want people to be able to move on with their lives. We want people to be productive, to be forward-looking. So that's why tax debt with the IRS expires roughly 10 years from the date of assessment, and it can get extended out by certain things. But by understanding the law and what the IRS can do, I would have saved him so much money and effort, because the IRS can only go back 6 years. So right now, we're in July. In a couple more months, I'm going to tell people to stop filing their 2018 return. Why? Because the IRS is taking 6 months to process it. And by the time you pay for a tax preparer to prepare it, you get all the documents together and submit the return, the IRS probably won't have it processed until January. And what's going to happen in January? It's not going to be required anyway. So unless you need an immediate resolution, and if they're doing other tax returns, I'll just have them do 19 through 23, the current year. And as soon as January 1st comes along, they'll have to be focused on getting 24 done. But that's your 6 years. So planning and avoiding taxes is not illegal. It's actually your legal right per the Supreme Court. Funny story here. When I first started in tax law, I went in for my very first interview. I needed a job. My wife had gotten really sick, and so just needed a job, needed to land on my feet. We had to move for her hospital care, and so had just moved and didn't have any connections. So I went in for the interview for a tax position, and I came out of there thinking, geez, a lot of these clients, they procrastinated, they haven't paid their taxes, etc. And so I didn't come out with a favorable impression. And I hadn't really worked with people. I didn't really know what the job was like. And I told my brother, I'm like, I'm just helping people, that procrastinated. Life is sometimes it's happened to them, but a lot of times it's just happening. So I'm helping people save money on taxes. That's all I'm doing. And my brother said, hold the phone. This is my brother, who's a little bit of a libertarian. He told me one of the most patriotic things you can do is help people pay less in taxes. And I laughed because my brother is funny like that. But he's right. Why is it patriotic? Because it helps individual Americans move on with their lives. Again, we help people get straight with the IRS, but through the process we give them advice, we give them counsel on how to and how to pay as little as possible so that they can get on their feet, be productive, and be involved in the community, move forward. And there's so many people that are stressing out. And honestly, in a way, we are helping the IRS to clean up a lot of their delinquent accounts. By either setting up an installment agreements or we do an offer in compromise, we serve a valuable function in teaching and training people how to be good little taxpayers moving forward, helping them understand, by helping them understand and comply with the tax obligations, but also cleaning up the mess and helping people make sure that they're current, that they won't have any problems moving forward. And honestly, a lot of this really is life just happens to people, and that's one thing I've really come to understand after working years in the industry. It really is life just happens to people, and it happens to all of us sooner or later. A lot of times it's things that you can't expect. So we help people file the right number of taxes. If they have tax debt expiring, we help people let it expire. True story. I had this case one time. The gentleman owed around $25,000 and called the IRS, and $15,000 was going to expire in a week. So I asked the IRS representative, "Hey, can we just do a payment plan on the $10,000 that's not going away in a week?" And the representative got all huffy and said, "No, this amount is due. You have to pay it in the next week." I said, "Okay, that's nice. I'll call you back in 2 weeks," and hung up. I try not to hang up on the IRS, but I excused myself from the call and I disconnected. Called back in 2 weeks. The $15,000 had expired, and set up the installment agreement on the $10,000 that was remaining. Did exactly what I wanted to. I just had to wait till it dropped off their system. And once it drops off their system, we can get tax liens removed. We can, get a lot of stuff taken care of, and help taxpayers, get on their feet and move forward. So, there are plenty of people that can't afford to make payments, or they can't pay the full amount that the IRS is demanding. This goes for states as well. So setting up something that someone can afford instead of putting them in the poorhouse. I have people robbing people to pay Paul, running up credit card debt just to afford to pay their taxes. It shouldn't be like that, and there are rules and regulations to protect your rights. I just had a case, again, very deep within the IRS, dealing with special compliance. It's a fairly large case, a few $100,000, but we have a retiree on Social Security, just living her life out. Not a lot of assets here, and we're going to go ahead and put her in a non-collectible status. But it's taken a couple of years to fight with the IRS to get into this point, and that's our whole goal. And the tax debt actually came from being scammed. She was scammed and lost close to $1 million. And then, lo and behold, she had to pay the taxes on that. So again, another situation which we're seeing all too often, where people are getting scammed out of money and then they have to deal with the tax consequences. So if you have questions, how do I save money? How do I pay less to the IRS? Sometimes we'll go over someone's information and say, there's not a whole lot we can do here, but there are various ways to do that, from penalty abatements to making sure that you file the necessary tax returns and only the necessary ones, to different programs where you can wipe out balances, save money on it, or let tax debt expire. We have plenty of cases where we're just waiting for a tax debt expire to then set up a resolution. We're just keeping an eye on the case until then. So if you have questions, how can I save more money and pay less? As long as you're doing it legally, and I won't do anything that I'm not 100% forthright with the IRS about it. You can save a lot of money. You can frequently save a lot of money depending on your financial situation. So if you have questions, give us a call, 520-485-7371, or you can find us online at guardiantaxlaw.com. And again, all these shows are being uploaded to our YouTube channel, as well as being rebroadcast later in the afternoon. So I hope you have a great weekend. It's sunny out there. There's a lot to do, so get out with your family. Forget about taxes for the weekend. But let's come back Monday and make sure that we're making taxes easier for you, your family, so that you can breathe easier at night and start building for your own financial success and financial future. So Hubert Johnson here with Guardian Tax Law, and sign off. Have a great weekend, everybody.